I'll never forget a couple I counseled early in my career. They were both successful in their careers. They were both intelligent. They were both well educated. He was a doctor, and they were both attractive. However, they were having sex so rarely, they came into counseling to try to figure it out. What are the issues? What's going on? Neither were sexually abused. Neither had negative previous sexual encounters. There was no rapes. There was no abortions. There was no affairs. Okay, no one had an affair or any issues with pornography. And they've been married for a few years, and sex was only happening every 2 or 3 months. And their work schedules were kind of 8 to 5, and the weekends were off, and they had no children. So they were kind of befuddled as to what is going on, okay? And like me, you would have been like, so what's the problem? Well, when you've heard me say that when you believe in a certain way, you behave in a certain way. So to change how you behave, you must be aware of what you truly believe to change how you behave. As I was counseling this couple, it became crystal clear that they both had a wrong belief. She believed with all her heart, these are good Christian people, that only the man was to initiate sex. He had an equally bad belief that only women were supposed to initiate sex. They never talked about their beliefs. They just behaved their beliefs. They both wanted sex, but were wanting the other person to initiate it because that's what they believed for whatever reason. So after we got done laughing, okay, the first thing we did is we had to become aware of these erroneous beliefs that they both had. And we laughed about it, and we were able to get through that, but we had to move on. And as many couples, especially Christian couples, they are not trained around sexuality. We had to start at the very beginning with this couple. They had to learn how to be intimate with sex with each other, how to be sexual with each other in a healthier way, and it's in the materials. I really want you to have a great sex life. Okay, now this may sound simple, but I had to train thousands of couples actually how to initiate sex. I am amazed at how many couples do not use the words to initiate sex. They touch, they scratch, they hug, they snuggle, but they never actually ask each other to be sexual. In my book and DVD, Upgrade Your Sex Life, I have a whole chapter on just this one section, okay? And in the intimacy book that I'm asking you to start a group with, there is the process in where you ask each other to be sexual, okay? And so like so many thousands of couples, I trained them to ask each other, how to ask for sex. And you can do this today with your spouse. You can both sit in a chair facing each other, and you can use words like making love, be sexual, be physically intimate. And when you ask each other 3 times, you ask each other 3 times and the spouse responds positive, like, yes, awesome, great. And I would avoid things like okay or sure because that kind of sounds neutral. And you practice this 3 times each day until you're both comfortable asking each other to have a sexual encounter. And this might take a whole week or 2. And this is a very simple skill, and you can do this at home. You can teach other couples to do this. Just sit each other and ask each other. I've done this with 1,000 people, and you should have heard the laughter and the silly noises that came from these people because they've been married for 10, 15, 20 years, and they've never asked each other for sex. Can you imagine that? You probably can imagine that. You're thinking right now, yeah, I think I'm one of those couples, Dr. Weiss. We probably should do this today. Thanks, Dr. Doug. We need to talk about this tonight. And sit in the chair and actually practice that. And if someone's like, oh, I can't, I don't, wow, it's uncomfortable, it's so weird, I don't know. And now they get into all that weirdness, the Spirit of God is not there, okay? Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And that looks like, I would like to make love to you. I want to be physically intimate with you. And the other person goes, yeah, right? That'd be great. And it should be a relaxed thing coming out of your soul in a very relaxed way. Now, it's a skill, so it might take 2 weeks for you to get that skill, okay? But do it. So you might be in a marriage just like this. When I asked her, while he was sitting next to her, how often she wants to have sex, she said 3 times a week. When I asked him how often he wants to have sex, he said 3 times a week. So here's a couple that both want sex 3 times a week, but were instead having it every 4 to 6 weeks or less. Like so many couples, they just didn't communicate. And it's important to have a conversation needed to be able to work through the sexual issues, to have agreement and peace sexually. And once they learned what each other wanted, and they were trained in my office to ask for sexuality, then they went on their merry way and had much more happily ever after, and they probably did life great, okay? And you can help couples just by going through the Intimacy 100-Day Guidebook to tackle this and so many other issues for them to have a more happily ever after. And this is what we're talking about ministry. See, so many churches are set up to preach, and I'm all for preaching. And I can preach. I can preach up a storm. I've preached all over the world. But there's a place where we don't need just preaching. We need principles, and we need people to talk about real things in our life. And sometimes we don't need to be talked at. We need to be talked to. And sometimes we need to be able to talk toward another person. Sometimes confessing issues, sometimes just learning and interacting. And Jesus said, make disciples. Disciple making is a process. It's not a conversation. And so you can take the weeks and go through this material with your group friends, your social media friends, your people at church. Make a Sunday school out of it. A lot of churches have done that. And you can actually let the conversation heal the marriages.
For more content and resources to help in your healing journey with Christ, make sure to follow Dr. Doug Weiss on Facebook and Instagram. If you'd like to share full episodes of this show with friends and family, subscribe to Healing Time Ministries on YouTube, and feel free to leave us a comment on any of Dr. Doug's social media platforms. Our team would love to hear your feedback and learn how Healing Time is impacting your life, your church, and your ministry.